The sound of the auctioneer's gavel cracked like a rifle shot in the dry Texas air. Dust swirled around the wooden platform where 3 children stood, their heads bowed, small hands clutching rough burlap sacks they'd been told to carry. They didn't cry, didn't speak. They just stood there, silent, thin, eyes hollow from too many miles of walking and too many nights without shelter. 3 orphans, siblings. The auctioneer barked, voice sharp and businesslike. No questions, no history. You take M, they're yours. Startin' at $1 a head. A few townsfolk shifted uncomfortably. Some shook their heads. Buying children was a thing that happened, but not everyone liked seeing it out in the open. It made the air heavy, like a sin no one wanted to claim. In the back of the crowd, a woman in a faded black dress stood still as stone. Her name was Clara Givens, a widow who'd buried her husband 2 winters back and her last child the winter before that. The town knew her as quiet, hardworking, maybe too proud for her own good. Folks left her alone because she asked for nothing, but something in the way those 3 stood, silent, resigned, pulled at her in a way she hadn't felt since before the fever had taken her little boy. $2. A man in a brown vest called out lazily, not even looking at the children. $3, Clara said, her voice steady but low. Heads turned. The auctioneer's eyebrows lifted. $3 sold. The gavel came down again, and just like that, the children belonged to her. Nobody clapped. Nobody smiled. They just watched as Clara stepped forward, coins in hand, and the children climbed down from the platform like shadows following her. As they walked through town, whispers rose behind them. That woman's lost her mind. 3 mouths to feed? She ain't got the means. Mark my words, she'll regret it. Clara didn't look back. The children stayed close, their bare feet kicking up the same dust that clung to her hem. They didn't thank her, didn't say a word, only kept those sacks in their hands as if whatever was inside was the last thing they owned in the world. Her homestead sat 3 miles outside town, a weathered clapboard house with a leaning barn and a chicken coop that hadn't seen hens in years. The grass around it was dead and dry, but the place was still standing stubborn, like her. Inside, the air smelled of old wood and stale flour. Clara set a pot on the stove and poured what little beans she had into it. The children sat at the table, shoulders hunched, eyes down. They didn't fidget or explore or whisper among themselves. "What are your names?" she asked gently. No answer. She tried again. "Do you understand me?" Still nothing. The oldest, a girl maybe 12, finally looked up. Her eyes were so dark they seemed bottomless. But there was something in them, a quiet defiance, or maybe just the last scraps of hope refusing to die. Clara offered a small smile, but the girl looked away. Night came early, as it always did in the wide plains. Clara laid out blankets near the hearth and gave each child a tin cup of water. They drank silently, then curled up without protest, as if they'd been doing this their whole lives. She watched them for a long time, the way their thin shoulders rose and fell with sleep. In the morning, Clara saddled her mule and rode into town for supplies. As she stepped into the general store, the room went quiet. Men at the counter stopped talking, eyes cutting her way. "You hear she bought M?" One man muttered, not quietly enough. $3 for 3 orphans. Waste of good money. She'll bring trouble down on herself. Mark my words. Clara ignored them, taking flour, lard, and a sack of beans to the counter. Mr. Keene, the storekeeper, weighed each item slowly. "Clara," he said finally, voice low. "You know folks talkin'. Ain't right, them kids. They been passed around like unwanted cattle. Some say they come from up north. Others say worse. Might be better you bring M back before trouble finds you." She met his gaze. "I won't be bringing them back." Keene sighed, sliding her change across the counter. "Then you best be ready for what comes." By the time Clara rode home, the sky had turned the color of beaten copper. The children were in the yard, standing still as fence posts, clutching their sacks as though afraid she might take them away. She knelt beside the youngest, a boy maybe 5, his hair matted and face streaked with dirt. "You can stay," she said softly. "I'll look after you. But you'll have to speak, sooner or later." I can't help you if I don't know who you are. The boy blinked at her. His lips parted, as if a word was about to come, but nothing came out. He lowered his head again, silent as ever. Clara straightened, her chest tight. She didn't know what ghosts these children carried, but she could feel the weight of them in the air. That night, as the wind howled against the boards of the old house, she woke to a sound soft footsteps, the faint creak of the floorboards. She rose quietly and found the oldest girl standing near the door, clutching her sack like it was life itself. Do you need something? Clara whispered. The girl looked at her, eyes dark and unreadable. Then, without a word, she went back to her blanket and lay down again. Clara stood there for a long time, listening to the wind. Something about those children unsettled her, not in a way that frightened her, but in a way that felt like standing on the edge of a cliff in the dark, knowing there was something vast below but not knowing how deep it went. And in that quiet, with the fire dying low, she realized this was only the beginning. The days that followed fell into a rhythm, Clara cooking what little she had, the children eating in silence, and the house filled with a quiet so heavy it pressed on her chest. She tried everything, soft questions, gentle smiles, small gestures, but they never spoke. They followed her commands, helped with chores when shown, but not once did a sound pass their lips. The sack stayed with them at all times. They slept with them clutched to their chests, carried them even to the well, never once letting Clara see what was inside. In town, the gossip only grew. Clara heard it whispered as she passed by the saloon or while she loaded supplies onto her mule. She's keeping them like pets. Folks say they're cursed. Bad luck follows those kids. Her husband's been dead 2 years, and now she's playing mother to strangers? Mark my words, this won't end right. Even the preacher paid her a visit one Sunday. Reverend Talbot was a thin, hawk-eyed man who believed in order above mercy. You've taken on a burden that isn't yours, he said, standing on her porch with his hands clasped behind his back. There are homes they can go to, better homes, Christian homes. They're children, Clara said. They'll stay. They've got no past anyone can vouch for. That alone should trouble you. It doesn't, she answered, though her voice carried a steel edge now. The Reverend narrowed his eyes. Charity's one thing, Clara, but folly's another. Don't let pity blind you to sense. When he left, she watched his figure shrink down the dirt road until it disappeared over the ridge. For the first time in years, Clara felt the sting of anger, at him, at the town, at the way kindness had become something folks felt they had to explain away. That evening, as she ladled out thin stew into tin bowls, the oldest girl finally looked at her and held her gaze. It wasn't gratitude. It wasn't defiance. It was something deeper, like a silent test. Clara set her spoon down slowly. You've been through something, she said softly. I can see it. You don't have to tell me. Not yet. But I'm not sending you away. Do you understand? The girl blinked once, just once, then lowered her eyes again. The next morning, Clara hitched up her mule to go into town for a delivery. She needed flour and kerosene, maybe a little salt pork if she could afford it. She didn't take the children. They were safer at the homestead. But as soon as she stepped into the general store, she knew something was wrong. The air was colder. Men at the counter stopped talking, their eyes sliding to her with a kind of pity, or maybe contempt. What happened? She asked finally, setting her coins down for Mr. Keene. He hesitated. Sheriff Whitlock was asking about you. About the children. Clara's shoulders tightened. Why? Seems someone's been spreading talk, saying they're runaways, saying they might belong to someone who'll come looking to. They're orphans, Clara said firmly. Keene shook his head. I know you believe that, but folks out here, they like their peace. They don't like strays. They don't like mysteries. By the time Clara rode back, a storm was building on the horizon, thick clouds rolling in, the wind carrying that electric smell that warned of lightning. The children were waiting by the door, sacks in hand, eyes wide and watchful. Clara's heart sank. They'd heard something. Maybe they'd seen someone ride past while she was gone. She crouched down, brushing the youngest boy's hair out of his face. It's all right. You're safe here. No one's going to take you away. But the girl, always the silent leader, gripped her sack tighter and stepped in front of her siblings, her jaw set like stone. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. The storm raged, rain pounding against the roof in hard, slanted sheets. She sat by the fire, shotgun across her lap, listening for hoofbeats through the wind. And just before dawn, she heard it, the faint creak of the gate. Clara moved to the window, heart pounding. A lantern bobbed in the dark, carried by a man on horseback. Behind him, 2 more riders followed. They weren't coming to visit. She felt her stomach twist. The warnings had been true. Trouble had found her. The riders didn't rush. They moved slow, deliberate, as if they had all the time in the world. Clara stood at the window, shotgun gripped tight, her breath fogging the glass. The lantern light caught the edges of their faces. Rough men, strangers to her. They dismounted just past the gate, boots sinking into the wet earth. One of them called out, voice deep and steady. "Ma'am, we're looking for 3 children. You got M." The words cut through the rain like a blade. Clara didn't answer. The man stepped closer. "We're not here to hurt you. Those kids belong to someone. They were took without permission. We're just here to bring M back." Inside, the children were huddled near the hearth. The oldest girl stood in front of her brothers, clutching her sack so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her eyes were wide but not scared. Not exactly. It was something else. Clara stepped onto the porch, the shotgun still in her hands. "They're not yours," she said, "and they're not going anywhere." The man in front tilted his head, rain dripping from the brim of his hat. "Lady, you don't know what you're standing in the way of. Best thing you can do is hand M over and forget this ever happened." "They're children," Clara said. "That's all I need to know." Behind him, one of the riders spat into the mud. "She's gonna make this hard. Told ya." The leader held up a hand. "Easy." His gaze fixed on Clara again. "You got no idea who they really are, do you?" Clara said nothing. "They ain't orphans," he went on. "They were raised for a purpose, bred for it, and they're worth more than you can imagine. That's why we've been sent for 'em." Lightning flashed, splitting the sky in 2. For a brief second, Clara saw the glint of metal beneath their coats. Guns. The oldest girl stepped forward then, just one small step, and shook her head almost imperceptibly, like she was warning Clara not to speak, not to ask. Clara's stomach sank. She didn't know what to believe anymore. The man took another step forward. "Last chance. Don't make us do this the hard way." Inside the house, the floor creaked. Clara risked a glance over her shoulder. The boy, the youngest, had stepped out from behind his sister. He was holding his sack with both hands, clutching it to his chest like a lifeline. The men outside hadn't seen him yet. "Ma'am," the leader said again, voice firmer now, "don't choose wrong here." The wind whipped through the yard, rattling the porch boards, carrying the smell of rain and something sharp, like iron. And then, far off in the distance, came another sound. Hoofbeats. But not 3, not 5, dozens. The men froze, turning toward the sound. A faint orange glow rose over the ridge, the flicker of torches moving fast through the night. The leader's face went pale. "They're here," he muttered. Clara's grip on the shotgun tightened. Whoever they weren't stopping. The riders in Clara's yard turned toward the ridge, their lanterns swinging wildly as they scrambled to their horses. Torches bobbed like fireflies in the distance, drawing closer with every heartbeat. The pounding of hooves carried through the storm, a deep rhythmic thunder that seemed to shake the ground itself. Clara stepped back inside, closing the door but not locking it. The children stood huddled by the fire, eyes wide, sacks clutched like they were the only thing keeping them from falling apart. She crouched low, her voice steady though her hands trembled. "What's happening? Who's coming?" The oldest girl stared at her for a long moment. Then, finally, she spoke. "They're coming for us." The words were soft, almost broken, but they filled the room like a shout. Clara froze. It was the first time she'd heard any of them speak. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. The girl glanced at her brothers. Her lips parted like she wanted to say more, but instead, she untied the rough cord on her sack and tipped it over. A heavy metal emblem clattered onto the table, A medallion, weathered but unmistakably valuable. Strange markings were carved into it. Not English, not Spanish. Clara reached for it but stopped short, as if touching it might bring down everything she didn't understand. The girl's voice trembled. They say we're chosen. They want us back. For what's coming. Before Clara could ask more, the thunder of hoofbeats reached the edge of the yard. The three men outside had mounted up, guns drawn, shouting to one another. Then the torches appeared, dozens of riders, faces half-painted in ash and red clay, eyes burning in the torchlight. The leader of the first group shouted at them, voice ragged with fear. "You want the kids, you'll have to." His words died as an arrow hissed through the rain, striking the lantern in his hand. The glass shattered in a spray of fire, plunging the yard into flickering shadows. Clara backed toward the children, heart hammering. The girl slid the medallion back into her sack, her face set like stone. "They won't hurt you," she said quietly, "but you can't stop what happens next." Outside, one of the riders turned his torch skyward and let out a long, low cry, half song, half warning. The others answered back. The sound was haunting, like something old and holy rising from the earth itself. And in that moment, Clara realized, whatever these children were, whatever past they carried, they weren't just runaways. They were the reason two different worlds were about to collide in her yard. Lightning flashed again, turning every shadow into a blade. Clara felt something shift deep inside her, fear giving way to something harder, fiercer. If the world wanted these children, it would have to go through her first. The rain eased just as the first rays of dawn cut through the clouds. Smoke rose from the wet ground where the torches had burned out, curling into the pale morning light. The riders were gone, both the men who had come to take the children and those who had fought to protect them. Clara stood on her porch, the shotgun still in her hands, though it felt heavier now. Her dress was torn, her hair damp and clinging to her cheeks, but her eyes stayed fixed on the road that wound away from her homestead. Behind her, the children sat at the table, quiet but no longer hollow. The oldest girl's face was streaked with rain and soot, yet she looked different, less guarded, more alive. Clara stepped inside and set the shotgun against the wall. She sat down across from them, her hands res. Content truncated due to size limit. Use line ranges to read in chunks.